Have you ever felt so lost in life that you couldn't see any light at the end of the tunnel? For Mark Thompson, a 45-year-old former construction worker from Denver, Colorado, this was more than just a fleeting thought. It was his daily reality. After losing his job, his wife, and nearly everything he owned, Mark found himself staring into the abyss of depression, wondering if there was any point in continuing. Mark's tiny studio apartment in downtown Denver had become both his sanctuary and his prison. The bare walls, scattered takeout containers, and pile of unpaid bills told the story of a man who had given up on life. The weight of his failures pressed down on him like a heavy blanket, making even the simplest tasks seem insurmountable. Every morning, he would sit by his window, watching the world go by, feeling more disconnected with each passing day. Life hadn't always been this way for Mark. Just 2 years ago, he had everything he thought he needed: a successful career as a construction site manager, a beautiful home in the suburbs, and a marriage that seemed unshakable. The economic downturn had hit the construction industry hard, but Mark had always believed his position was secure. That false sense of security made the layoff even more devastating when it came. The domino effect that followed was swift and merciless. Without steady income, the mortgage payments became impossible to maintain. The stress took its toll on his marriage, and Sarah, his wife of 15 years, couldn't handle watching him spiral into depression. She left 6 months ago, leaving nothing but a note and the crushing weight of failure on Mark's shoulders. In his darkest moments, Mark would think about his father, who had always taught him that a man's worth was measured by his ability to provide and protect. Now, at 45, he felt like he had failed at both. The shame of having to move from his beautiful home to a cramped studio apartment in a rundown building ate away at his self-worth, leaving him feeling hollow and purposeless. The isolation grew worse with each passing day. Friends stopped calling, tired of his constant refusal to socialize. Family members that attempts to help were met with stubborn resistance, as Mark couldn't bear the thought of being seen as a charity case. The walls of his small apartment seemed to close in a little more each day, matching the shrinking of his world. That particular morning in late autumn started like any other. Mark sat in his usual spot by the window, nursing a cold cup of coffee, watching the early morning commuters hurry past his building. The gray Denver sky matched his mood perfectly, threatening rain that would never quite fall. He hadn't bothered looking for work in weeks, convinced that no one would hire someone his age who had failed so spectacularly. The sound of distant sirens mixed with the usual city noise created a melancholic symphony that seemed to underscore the futility of his existence. Mark's phone lay silent on the table, its screen dark for days. He couldn't remember the last time someone had called just to check on him. The thought didn't even hurt anymore. It had become just another fact of his new reality. His savings were almost depleted, and the few odd jobs he'd managed to find barely covered his rent. The refrigerator contained nothing but condiments and a half-empty carton of milk past its expiration date. Even feeding himself had become an afterthought, as though his body was just going through the motions of survival, while his spirit had already given up. For the first time in weeks, Mark forced himself to leave his apartment, not out of any sense of purpose, but because the walls were beginning to feel like they were suffocating him. The crisp autumn air hit his face as he stepped outside, but he barely noticed it. His feet moved automatically, taking him toward the small park 3 blocks from his building. He didn't have a destination in mind, he just needed to move. The park was nearly empty at this hour, save for a few early morning joggers and dog walkers. Mark found an isolated bench away from the main path where he could sit undisturbed with his thoughts. The leaves were starting to turn, creating a carpet of red and gold beneath his feet. In another life, he might have found it beautiful. Now it just seemed like another reminder of things ending. As he sat there, Mark pulled out his wallet, more out of habit than necessity. Inside, behind his driver's license, was a photo of him and Sarah on their 10th anniversary. They looked so happy, so certain of their future together. He couldn't remember the last time he had smiled like that. The photo served as a painful reminder of everything he had lost. The sound of children laughing in the distance made Mark's chest tighten. He and Sarah had always talked about having kids, but something always seemed to get in the way. Their careers, the timing, the mortgage. Now, at 45, he wondered if he'd ever have the chance to be a father. The thought sent another wave of despair washing over him. Time seemed to lose meaning as Mark sat on that bench, lost in his memories and regrets. The morning joggers had been replaced by mothers with strollers and elderly couples taking their daily walks. Each person who passed seemed to have a purpose, a reason for being there. Mark felt like a ghost, invisible and disconnected from the world around him. The temperature had dropped considerably, and dark clouds were gathering overhead, but Mark barely noticed. His mind was occupied with thoughts he'd been trying to suppress for weeks. What was the point of continuing? Who would even notice if he just disappeared? The weight of these thoughts pressed down on him until it became difficult to breathe. Morning turned to early afternoon, and still Mark sat, paralyzed by indecision and despair. He had stopped checking his phone, stopped looking at job listings, stopped trying to reconnect with old friends. The world had moved on without him, and he couldn't see any way to catch up. The gap between who he was and who he used to be seemed impossibly wide. The first drops of rain began to fall, but Mark didn't move. The cold droplets running down his face provided a strange kind of comfort, as though nature itself was crying the tears he couldn't shed. He had reached the point where even the discomfort of being wet and cold didn't register anymore. Nothing seemed to matter. As the rain began to fall more steadily, the park slowly emptied of people seeking shelter. Mark remained on his bench, his clothes growing increasingly soaked. The physical discomfort was almost welcome. It was the first thing he had truly felt in weeks. In that moment, as he sat alone in the rain, Mark Thompson made a decision that would have been unthinkable just a few years ago. Finally, Mark stood up from the bench, his joints stiff from sitting for so long in the cold. He had made up his mind. There was nothing left for him here, nothing to keep him going. As he turned to leave the park, his vision blurred. Whether from rain or tears, he couldn't tell. But fate had other plans for Mark Thompson that day, and help was about to arrive in the most unexpected form. The rain was falling harder now, creating small rivers along the park paths. Mark took one last look around, trying to commit the scene to memory. He had no way of knowing that in just a few moments everything would change. A small sound, barely audible over the rain, was about to alter the course of his life forever. This story takes place in Denver, Colorado, where a man named Mark Thompson was about to receive an unexpected visitor that would change his life forever. As Mark walked slowly through the rain, contemplating his darkest thoughts, he had no idea that a tiny creature was about to give him a reason to live again. Sometimes, hope comes in the smallest packages, and miracles happen when we least expect them. As Mark trudged through the rain, a faint sound caught his attention. A weak, desperate mewing coming from behind a cluster of rain-soaked cardboard boxes near the park's exit. At first, he tried to ignore it, convinced that getting involved with anything or anyone would only add to his burdens. But something about the pitiful cry tugged at what remained of his heart. Through the curtain of rain, Mark spotted a tiny, bedraggled form huddled against the soggy cardboard. A kitten, no more than a few weeks old, was struggling to stay dry under a piece of torn cardboard. Its gray fur was matted and dirty, and its tiny body shook violently with each gust of wind. The sight stirred something in Mark that he thought had died long ago: compassion. Without thinking, Mark found himself kneeling beside the boxes, his own problems momentarily forgotten. The kitten looked up at him with brilliant blue eyes that seemed too large for its tiny face. Its left front paw was clearly injured, and patches of fur were missing from what looked like a recent fight or accident. The creature's condition mirrored Mark's own broken state. The irony wasn't lost on Mark. Here he was, a man who couldn't take care of himself, contemplating helping another living being. But as he reached out tentatively, the kitten did something unexpected. Instead of running away, it dragged itself forward and crawled into his outstretched hands, as if it had been waiting for him all along. The trust in those blue eyes pierced straight through Mark's protective shell. Despite his initial hesitation, Mark found himself cradling the tiny creature inside his jacket, shielding it from the rain. The kitten's body was ice cold, and its breathing seemed labored. For the first time in months, Mark felt a surge of purpose. This small, helpless being needed him. The realization hit him like a physical force. He might have given up on himself, but he couldn't give up on this innocent creature. The walk back to his apartment was a blur, with Mark focusing solely on keeping the kitten warm and protected. His mind raced with thoughts he hadn't entertained in months. Practical concerns about food, shelter, and care for another living being. The kitten had stopped shivering and was now purring softly against his chest, creating a warmth that seemed to spread through his entire body. Once inside his apartment, Mark's problems came into sharp focus. He had no cat food, no litter box, and barely enough money for his own needs. The kitten needed medical attention for its injured paw, but veterinary care was expensive. For a moment, the overwhelming nature of the situation threatened to send him back into despair. But then the kitten looked up at him and meowed softly, as if saying, "We'll figure it out together." Mark's first priority was warming up the kitten. He wrapped it in his cleanest towel and gently dried its fur, discovering that underneath the dirt and grime, the kitten was actually a beautiful silver-gray color. As he cleaned its injured paw, the kitten didn't fight or try to escape. It seemed to understand that Mark was trying to help. This unconditional trust both touched and terrified him. The rest of the evening was spent trying to make the kitten comfortable. Mark found an old shoebox and lined it with a soft t-shirt for a bed. He warmed some milk, which he later learned wasn't ideal for kittens, and offered it in a shallow bowl. The kitten's eagerness to eat made him realize how hungry it must have been, and by extension, made him aware of his own neglected hunger. Looking around his bare apartment, Mark suddenly saw it through new eyes. The space that had felt like a prison now needed to become a home. Not just for him, but for this tiny creature that had literally crawled into his life. The responsibility was daunting, but for the first time in months, Mark felt a flicker of something that felt suspiciously like hope. That night, as Mark lay in bed, the kitten insisted on sleeping, curled up against his neck, its soft purring creating a soothing rhythm that seemed to calm his racing thoughts. He realized that this was the first night in months that he hadn't fallen asleep thinking about everything he had lost. Instead, his mind was occupied with plans for tomorrow. He needed to find a vet, get proper cat food, maybe even clean up the apartment a bit. The morning brought new challenges. The kitten's injured paw was worse than Mark had initially thought, and it clearly needed professional medical attention. Looking at his nearly empty wallet, Mark felt the familiar wave of helplessness threatening to overwhelm him. But when the kitten limped over to rub against his leg, purring despite its pain, he knew he had to find a way. In a moment of desperation, Mark did something he hadn't done in months. He reached out for help. He called his sister, Amy, who had left countless unanswered messages on his phone. When she heard his voice, she didn't ask questions or make accusations. She simply listened as he explained about the kitten, and without hesitation, offered to help with the veterinary bills. The visit to the vet revealed more about the kitten's condition. It was severely malnourished, had a sprained paw, and needed treatment for parasites. But the vet assured Mark that with proper care, the kitten, which he discovered was a male, would make a full recovery. The cost of treatment was substantial, but Amy kept her word, helping without judgment or conditions. As Mark sat in the vet's office, holding the kitten while it received its treatments, he found himself opening up to Amy about everything. The job loss, the depression, the dark thoughts that had been consuming him. It was as if the presence of this small creature had somehow made it easier to admit his own vulnerability. Amy listened, tears in her eyes, and for the first time, Mark felt the wall he had built around himself beginning to crumble. Through all of this, the kitten remained remarkably calm, as if sensing that its presence was somehow helping Mark heal. Even the vet commented on how unusual it was for a stray kitten to be so trusting and affectionate. When it was time to name him, Mark chose Hope, a name that might have seemed trite in any other circumstance, but felt perfectly right for this tiny survivor who had given him a reason to keep going. The next few weeks were a blur of activity as Mark adjusted to life with his new companion. Hope's presence demanded that Mark maintain some sort of routine: feeding times, medication schedules, playtime. Without realizing it, Mark found himself getting up earlier, keeping his apartment cleaner, and even making small improvements to make the space more cat-friendly. The responsibility of caring for Hope forced Mark to face his financial situation head-on. He couldn't continue drifting without income, not when another life depended on him. With Amy's encouragement, he began looking for work again, starting with small construction jobs. The process was humbling, but Hope's needs gave him the motivation to persist despite rejection and setbacks. Amy's support didn't stop with the vet bills. She began visiting regularly, bringing supplies for Hope and groceries for Mark. Through her, Mark slowly reconnected with other family members and friends. Hope seemed to have a gift for breaking down barriers. Even the most awkward reunions became easier when people could focus on playing with the playful kitten. The transformation in Hope's health was remarkable. As his paw healed and he gained weight, his personality blossomed. He became a bundle of energy, racing around the apartment and getting into mischief. His antics often made Mark laugh out loud, a sound that had been absent from the apartment for far too long. Each day, as Hope grew stronger, Mark felt himself growing stronger too. As Hope recovered and grew stronger, something unexpected began to happen. Mark started sharing photos of Hope's progress on social media, his first posts in over a year. The response was overwhelming. Friends, former colleagues, and even strangers were touched by the story of the man and the kitten who saved each other. Through these connections, Mark began receiving leads for construction work. One particularly significant moment came when Mark shared a before and after photo of Hope, showing his transformation from the scared, injured kitten to the playful, healthy cat he'd become. The post caught the attention of Lisa Martinez, the owner of a local construction company. She had lost her own cat recently and was moved by Mark's story of redemption through caring for Hope. Lisa reached out to Mark, initially to ask about Hope's recovery, but their conversations soon turned to Mark's background in construction management. She was impressed by his experience and, more importantly, by the dedication he showed in nursing Hope back to health. In her view, someone who would go to such lengths to save a stray kitten was exactly the kind of person she wanted on her team. The job interview with Lisa's company was unlike any Mark had experienced. Hope insisted on being present, curled up in Mark's lap throughout the meeting. Rather than seeing this as unprofessional, Lisa saw it as a sign of Mark's commitment and compassion. The tiny cat had become his greatest character reference. The offer from Lisa's company was a turning point. It wasn't just about the salary or the position. It was about being given a second chance. The job would allow Mark to rebuild his career while maintaining the flexibility to care for Hope. For the first time in years, he felt like he could see a path forward. With steady income on the horizon, Mark began making plans to move to a better apartment. Hope needed more space to play, and Mark needed a fresh start. During the apartment hunting process, he discovered that many of his potential neighbors were more interested in meeting Hope than in learning about Mark's job or references. The impact of Hope's presence extended beyond Mark's professional life. The kitten seemed to have a sixth sense about Mark's emotional state. On days when the weight of the past threatened to overwhelm him, Hope would appear with a toy, demanding attention and play. These simple interactions kept Mark anchored in the present rather than drowning in regret. Through caring for Hope, Mark began to reconnect with parts of himself he thought were lost. The patience required to train a kitten, the discipline needed to maintain a feeding schedule, the joy found in simple play, all of these experiences helped rebuild his sense of self-worth. Hope's unconditional love showed him that he was worthy of connection and trust. The transformation in Mark's living space was remarkable. What had once been a bare, depressing apartment became a home filled with life. Cat toys scattered across the floor, a cat tree by the window, and Hope's bed, though he preferred Mark's, added character to the space. More importantly, the changes reflected Mark's growing investment in the future. Word of Mark's story spread through the local community. A local pet supply store owner, touched by Hope's journey, offered Mark a store credit for cat supplies. This generosity inspired Mark to start volunteering at the local animal shelter during weekends, sharing his experience with others who were considering pet adoption. Mark's relationship with his family also underwent a profound change. Hope became the bridge that reconnected him with relatives he had pushed away during his depression. Sunday dinners at Amy's house became a regular occurrence, with Hope charming everyone with his playful antics. The kitten's presence made difficult conversations easier, providing a neutral topic when emotions ran high. The most unexpected development came when Sarah, Mark's ex-wife, came across his social media posts about Hope. She reached out, not to reconcile, but to express genuine happiness at seeing Mark's transformation. Their conversation, though brief, helped Mark find closure and accept that sometimes relationships end so new beginnings can emerge. As Hope approached his first birthday, Mark realized how much his life had changed in less than a year. From the brink of giving up to managing construction projects again, from isolation to being surrounded by a supportive community, all because a tiny kitten had chosen him that rainy day in the park. During a routine checkup, the vet who had treated Hope in those early days barely recognized Mark. Gone was the desperate, defeated man who had first brought in the injured kitten. In his place stood someone who had rediscovered his purpose and joy in life. The vet remarked that it was hard to tell who had rescued whom. The apartment that had once felt like a prison now buzzed with energy and life. Hope's presence attracted regular visitors, friends who came to play with the cat but stayed to reconnect with Mark. The walls that had once seemed to close in on him now displayed photos of Hope's journey from scared stray to confident house cat, each image marking a milestone in their shared recovery. Mark's new position at Lisa's company proved to be more than just a job. His experience with Hope had given him a new perspective on leadership and compassion. He found himself becoming a mentor to younger workers, sharing not just construction knowledge, but life lessons about resilience and the unexpected ways healing can come. 1 year to the day after finding Hope, Mark sat in his favorite chair, watching the kitten, now a sleek, healthy cat, play with a sunbeam. He realized that what had seemed like his lowest point had actually been the beginning of something beautiful. The day he had planned to give up had instead become the day he was given a new purpose. The transformation wasn't just physical or environmental, it was spiritual. Through caring for Hope, Mark had learned to care for himself again. The daily routine of feeding, playing, and nurturing another living being had slowly rebuilt his sense of worth and purpose. Hope had shown him that sometimes the smallest things can make the biggest differences. Lisa's company had thrived under Mark's management style, which was now infused with the patience and compassion he had learned from caring for Hope. She often joked that hiring Mark and his feline supervisor was the best decision she'd ever made. The construction sites he managed were known for their efficiency and positive atmosphere. The park bench where Mark had sat on that fateful rainy day became a special place for him and Hope. On weekends they would visit together, Hope safely harnessed and eager to explore. What had once been a place of despair was transformed into a symbol of renewal and second chances. The story of Mark and Hope began spreading beyond their local community. A local newspaper featured them in a story about pet adoption and mental health recovery, touching countless readers who saw their own struggles reflected in Mark's journey. The article's message was clear. Sometimes salvation comes with 4 paws and a purring heart. Mark's transformation inspired others at the construction company. Workers who had been struggling with their own challenges began opening up, creating a more supportive workplace culture. Lisa noticed that projects under Mark's supervision not only finished on time, but also had higher team morale and fewer conflicts. Hope's presence in the office became a regular occurrence. On days when Mark had to review plans or attend meetings, the cat would accompany him, charming everyone from clients to contractors. His calm demeanor and friendly nature made him an unofficial therapy cat for stressed employees. Even the most tense meetings seemed to go smoother when Hope was curled up in someone's lap. The bond between Mark and Hope grew stronger with each passing day. The cat seemed to have an uncanny ability to sense when Mark was having difficult moments. On nights when old memories threatened to overwhelm him, Hope would appear with his favorite toy, demanding playtime and effectively pulling Mark back from the edge of darker thoughts. Their story caught the attention of a local animal rescue organization, which invited Mark to share his experience at their fundraising events. Standing before groups of people, with Hope confidently perched on his shoulder, Mark found his voice. He spoke about second chances, unconditional love, and the healing power of animal companionship. The impact of their story rippled through the community. Several of Mark's co-workers ended up adopting cats from the local shelter, creating their own stories of transformation. The construction company became known not just for its quality work, but for its pet-friendly policies and commitment to employee mental health. Mark's professional life flourished under this new paradigm of compassion-led leadership. His teams consistently delivered projects ahead of schedule, and client satisfaction reached new heights. Lisa promoted him to senior project manager, citing not just his technical skills, but his ability to build and nurture effective teams. The apartment that had once been a symbol of Mark's downfall became a warm, welcoming space. Friends and family gathered regularly for dinner parties, with Hope playing the perfect host. The walls now displayed not just construction awards, but also photos of Hope's journey from scared kitten to confident cat, each image telling a story of mutual healing. Mark's relationship with his sister Amy deepened into a true partnership. Together, they started a small initiative to help cover veterinary bills for people who had rescued strays. The program, named Hope's Fund, helped ensure that financial constraints wouldn't prevent others from experiencing the transformative power of pet adoption. The local veterinary clinic, where Hope had received his initial treatment, asked Mark to join their advisory board. His experience and perspective proved valuable in helping them develop programs for low-income pet owners. The clinic even started a support group for people whose pets had helped them through mental health challenges. Hope's own transformation was remarkable. From the scared, injured kitten in the rain, he had grown into a confident, loving cat who seemed to understand his role in Mark's recovery. His injured paw, though fully healed, left him with a slight limp, a reminder of their shared journey from brokenness to healing. Mark's former wife, Sarah, seeing how much he had changed, reached out to rebuild a friendship. While their romantic relationship was over, they found they could support each other's new beginnings. Sarah even adopted a cat of her own, inspired by the change she had witnessed in Mark. The construction company's success led to expansion, and Mark was put in charge of developing their new pet-friendly office policies. Every new project site included a Hope's Corner, a designated space where workers could take breaks and decompress, often with their own pets who visited the sites. The park where Mark had found Hope became a special place for them. Every weekend they would visit, and Mark would keep an eye out for other strays or people who might need help. Several successful rescues and adoptions originated from these visits, creating a ripple effect of hope and healing in the community. Through social media, Mark connected with others who had similar stories of pets helping them through dark times. He started a blog chronicling his ongoing journey with Hope, offering support and encouragement to others struggling with depression and loneliness. The blog became a gathering place for people seeking inspiration and connection. Lisa's construction company became known as one of the most progressive employers in Denver, largely due to the culture of compassion that Mark had helped foster. Other companies began reaching out, wanting to learn how to implement similar pet-friendly policies and mental health support systems. Hope's story inspired a local artist to create a series of paintings depicting the bond between rescued pets and their owners. The exhibition, featuring Hope and Mark's story as its centerpiece, raised significant funds for animal rescue organizations while spreading awareness about the healing power of pet adoption. Mark's journey from despair to purpose became a testament to the unexpected ways healing can find us. His experience showed that sometimes the most profound transformations begin with the smallest acts of kindness, like reaching out to help a tiny kitten in the rain. Through it all, Hope remained by Mark's side, a living reminder that every life has value and that love can transform even the darkest moments into opportunities for growth. Their story became a beacon of hope for others, proving that sometimes the most powerful healing comes from the most unexpected sources. Mark's legacy at the construction company extended beyond successful projects and efficient management. He had created a culture where vulnerability was seen as strength, where compassion was valued as much as competence, and where second chances were given freely. All lessons he had learned from a tiny kitten on a rainy day in the park. Mark's journey with hope became a testament to the transformative power of unconditional love. As he sat in his office one evening, watching Hope contentedly napping on the windowsill, he reflected on how a single moment of compassion had completely altered the course of both their lives. What had seemed like his darkest hour had become the beginning of his greatest blessing. The ripple effects of their story continued to touch lives throughout Denver and beyond. Hope's Fund had grown into a substantial charity, helping dozens of people and their rescued pets each month. The sight of Mark and Hope at community events became a symbol of hope for others facing their own struggles, proving that rock bottom could become a foundation for rebuilding. Their weekly visits to the park where they first met took on new meaning. Mark often found himself sharing his story with strangers who were drawn to Hope's friendly nature. These conversations frequently led to deeper connections, as people opened up about their own battles with depression or loneliness. The park bench that had once witnessed his despair now served as a place of healing for others. The construction company's success continued to grow, with their pet-friendly policies setting new standards in the industry. Mark's leadership style, influenced by his experience with Hope, proved that compassion and business success could go hand in hand. The company's projects became known not just for their quality, but for the positive impact they had on workers' lives. Hope's presence in the office remained a constant source of joy and comfort. Clients would specifically request meetings when they knew Hope would be present, and the cat seemed to have an intuitive understanding of who needed his attention most on any given day. His slight limp, rather than being a disability, became a reminder that imperfections could be part of a greater purpose. Mark's relationship with his family continued to strengthen, with Hope serving as the catalyst for deeper connections and honest conversations. Sunday dinners at Amy's house became a cherished tradition, with Hope holding court among family members who once thought they had lost Mark forever. These gatherings were a testament to the healing power of time, love, and second chances. The blog documenting their journey evolved into a community of support and inspiration. People from around the world shared their own stories of how animals had helped them through difficult times. Mark found purpose in moderating these discussions, ensuring that everyone who reached out felt heard and supported, just as Hope had done for him. Looking back on that rainy day in the park, Mark realized that sometimes the greatest acts of salvation come disguised as simple moments of kindness. By choosing to help a tiny, injured kitten, he had unknowingly opened the door to his own healing. Hope had lived up to his name in every way, bringing light to Mark's darkness and purpose to his pain. Their story stands as a powerful reminder that no one is ever truly alone, and that help can come from the most unexpected sources. For Mark and Hope, what began as a chance encounter in the rain became a journey of mutual rescue, proving that sometimes the smallest creatures can have the biggest impact on our lives. As Mark watched the sun setting over Denver from his office window, Hope purring contentedly in his lap, he knew with certainty that every life has value and every story has the potential for redemption. Their journey together had shown that hope isn't just a feeling, it's a choice we make every day. And sometimes it comes with 4 paws and a heart full of unconditional love.